First, I want perhaps just to say thanks to Elad, who is not here. That took so much effort to organize that and other events. And to thanks the Catholic Academy for hosting us this wonderful way, which is very interesting to think that someone will teach now not only Talmud, but Jewish hermeneutics of the Talmud at the Catholic Academy. On the other hand, those who are a bit familiar with, I will say a few words about my work, won't be surprised that if I have to choose between the Catholic Church or the Protestant one, it will be the Catholic Church, because the Protestant one is exactly the problem of modernity. And by Protestant, now that will give me a smooth, perhaps a move. By Protestant, I don't mean only the Protestant tradition, but the way that, in a way, we are all Protestant. And let me say a few words about that, because that's related to the question of what I'm going to read. We are all Protestant, or all Lutheran, or all certain kind of this. I refer to that, say, shortly, I will take like the method, the critical way of reading text and its relation to ontology and politics. And that is based on the relationship, the figure that I'm using for that a lot is Spinoza. And let me just say immediately, that for me, there are two Spinozas. There is Spinoza of the theological political treatise, which is the Protestant Spinoza, I would call for the sake of, and there is Spinozas of the ethics, which I will not discuss at all. But this is this Spinoza actually dismantled, destroyed, criticized, and understood that the whole edifice of the TTP, of the theological political treatise, is wrong, and it's wrong basically because of certain things which are related to Spinoza's new understanding of ontology and the way that our language, our hermeneutics, etc., are related to that. And from my understanding, this is the reason that Spinoza, after he finished the ethics, he began to write his political treatise, because he understood that what he wrote before cannot stand anymore with Spinoza after the ethics. But to the extent that I'm speaking here, I'm mentioning the name Spinoza, I speak about Spinoza of the TTP, of the Theological Political Treatise. And I will come back to that. I'm not going to discuss here Spinoza in the full sense, I do it in other places, but that is part of the issue. Let me say a few more words about the topic. The way, and I'm not going to define it now, and I'm not going to get into details. I think it will come out at certain points, and if not, then it just stays like that. But I think you will have some kind of view, because it will take too much time to get into it. There is a certain relationship between what we understand as hermeneutics and between what we understand as reality. And Spinoza was, at that moment, in the 17th century, introduced a certain kind of understanding of the hermeneutics of the Bible, which says, which goes with the concept of literal sense and the concept of sola scriptura, which force, I will not go into it now, but if you take what does it involve? What does it mean about the world when you have such a view? And I think the basic idea, which goes, in a second I will talk, in a moment I will talk also about the academia and the Protestant academia, the Protestant secularism, etc., etc. The way that Spinoza understands how to read the text is related to a certain kind of now, which we are trying to get to. The now of the prophet, the now of the time that the text was written. And that's now, ontological now, the now or the nun or the jetzt, that's Heidegger perhaps will speak, but I think put that aside. This now is the way to understand. You do a whole critical work, history, reading the text edition, as Spinoza suggests, the new method, in order to get to the moment where meaning is really related to what's going on there outside. And you can really figure out that that's moment, that's now, and that's now is the real of reality. I will come to that now, perhaps in the third day, when we get to that. I am working for a long time, trying to show how what we don't understand, what strong metaphysical beliefs, and that's the strengths of the literal sense, critical way of thinking, the strength that it has on us, that we don't see what kind of ideology it is and to what kind of world of ideologies it belongs. And in other places, I try to show how much it's related to the question of secularism and how much it's related to the question of colonialism and how much it's related to capitalism. But that is not our subject here. The point is to try to ask in certain ways, and the text that I will discuss here is one of these ways, to ask about the possibilities of rethinking or intervening or challenging the very concept of hermeneutics that's in fact we all share, even if we are more think that we are more sophisticated than that. Now, what is to have a text? How to get with it? What does it mean to have hermeneutics? What does it mean that someone else does hermeneutics? How to read that someone interpretation of a text, and so on. With this text, I will try to show, and okay, in a second I will say something about the text, but I will try to I'm not going to discuss it explicitly the whole time. It will be in the background, and perhaps at some moment it will come up again. I'm just trying to show how it is related to the whole project. The question of challenging our understanding of what a text is and what is hermeneutics. And I find in this text that we are going to read a very interesting challenge to this modernist, secular, Protestant, all of these names that I just give now like that, a literal sense, and for me, more important, because it goes, in one of my previous lives, I was academic, teaching at academia, I was, one of the tools that we have, and we don't see the ideology behind it, is that's critical thought. And critical thought, I said now in a very general way, but I think about it as beginning. The genealogy of this should go back to that moment of Spinoza of the 17th century. And critical thought pretends always to make us this free-floating subject that Spinoza, the late Spinoza, will criticize the possibility of it, but the free-floating subject that can look at something outside of the world. Critical thought shares a certain kind of metaphysics with this Protestant or Lutheran, modern Protestant, I would say, a view of a text in the world. And so what I'm doing is to try to get into the very foundations of the way we think, and to see how much this heavy metaphysics and beliefs involve in that. Now to the text that we are going to discuss. So we're going to discuss 3 days. this one text and the text around it that he's using from Reb Chaim Soloveitchik. Don't mistake Reb Chaim Soloveitchik with the Professor Chaim Soloveitchik in America. Professor Chaim Soloveitchik, it's like two different things, no connection between them, apart from the name, I think. Yeah, I'm the grandson of the Adam. Or in the Lithuanian yeshiva, it was very common to say, although practically it's not true, because everywhere there is a class of people who hold the power, and but there was in education, in plain Hebrew, it was from the Mishnah, of course, but Torah lo nitna b'Yerusha. The Torah was not given in inheritance. You don't inherit. You can inherit many things. You can inherit money. You can inherit power, but you don't inherit Torah in Talmud, the knowledge of it. So,
it's an ideology.
Yeah, of course, a lot of. So this Chaim Soloveitchik, and I'm not historian, so I don't go to represent anything historically accurate about him. He was late 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, Talmudic scholar of the yeshiva, which I think no one will doubt, that he changed the study of the yeshiva, the whole curriculum and the whole way that we see a text, they see a text. Now, my work will be double, because I know that there are a few Talmudic scholars here, known a lot. So I will try to convince them, or you, that everything that they are taught, the yeshiva and his tradition about his work is false. And I will try to bring to the other people this pleasure and painful pleasure of studying Soloveitchik text. Now himself, I don't want to name many things about him. It's also interesting. He was like one of in the beginning of the 20th century, he was one of the leading radical anti-Zionist rabbis in Europe. He was even against Aguda for a long time, as well as his son later in Jerusalem, but part of the time. Something which is also interesting when you speak today in Berlin, because if you speak today in Berlin as an anti-Zionist Jew, you are supposed to be anti-Semitic, although this whole tradition of rabbis in Europe were entirely against the idea of a nation state and Zionism. And no one doubted the importance of Chaim Soloveitchik in the Jewish tradition. I mean, for those who are not coming from, there are many things to say about him personally. There were a few people tried to conceptualize the way he thinks. There was a guy in Oxford, he's in Oxford, I think he wrote his dissertation in the 70s in Manchester, Norman Salomon. I think he was the first one that's academically that's tried to give some, he called it Chaim Soloveitchik in a circle. It's very typical English, British, English-speaking world, the 70s, when everything was Wittgenstein, and also Reb Chaim was Wittgenstein. Chaim Soloveitchik became Wittgenstein. So he tries to read Soloveitchik, and it's a nice, I mean, I appreciate the fact that someone took so much effort in order to understand a text, which is very, now I don't try to, that's my way in general. I think that is my objection also, not objection to whole, but my struggle in a way with Jewish studies is I do not wish to define Chaim Soloveitchik. I think that's minor text, for the Western culture. should be used in a way of challenging the way that the world is seen, and not to be anthropologized and taken into the tradition by appropriating something which create. So for me, on this whole this began with the Wissenschaft des Judentum, this tragedy of Jewish studies, and it continues still today. And especially, it's interesting, and we're not, of course, it's not the subject of our discussion, but especially it's true about Talmudic studies. Anyone who has ever seen Talmud at the university knows that we actually really continue the Wissenschaft des Judentum. There is no thought in the Talmud. It is only a document, and the real spirit, which I will not discuss now, also Spinoza built on the spirit of the letter in the Protestant understanding, a certain kind. And I think the greatest disaster of Jewish studies, the smartest, the interesting one, which brought again this way in order to the new way of acquiring Judaism, whatever it means, into the discourse is Gershom Scholem. And for Gershom Scholem, exactly the whole project of the symbolic and the language, which is the spirit that can give meaning, and the whole of the rabbinic is the document, the letter. And I will not go now into a whole discussion of Scholem, but I think exactly that should stand in the issue here, that we are still under this. So Scholem again came from here, not here exactly, but and export the colonial view of Europe into the Jewish studies and Palestine, and then Israel and the United States. This text, how to address it. Now, I chose a very simple. These texts require certain kind of training, mostly, because it's already built on knowledge of many texts before, of the interpretation of the Talmud, and so on. And it's a kind of a play with that, which is also one of the reasons that Kabbalah is so popular and Talmud is so not popular. It's because someone has to study something in contrast to Kabbalah. But the point of the text that I chose is a very basically simple text. Not too many concepts from the Talmud that will bring that you have to know a lot about them and so on in order to understand what's going on. And I have two. I think I will do it in the following way. If it's going to be successful, I don't know, but I will try. There is no point. I mean, I will focus on one very important concept of Soloveitchik, which he introduced, which he never explained, which no one explained. In really, it's the concept of Tvei Dinim, which we'll discuss, a kind of two-aspect something, which I claim it's a question of hermeneutics and something that changes our understanding of hermeneutics. But without a bit of experiencing this text, it's like I don't know, talking about the construction without giving you any example of the construction ever. So it will be not only abstract. You don't understand I don't think you will be able to appreciate what is it about. I hope that after we read this text in the next few days, we will be able at least to appreciate what was done there, this kind of hermeneutic game, which is invented in Lithuania, in the yeshiva of Volozhin first, and then when the yeshiva of Volozhin is closed by the Tsar, it's basically goes to another small place, to Brisk, and so on, and then it spreads over. Again, I don't try now to talk about the influence of him. I don't try to talk the disagreements with other scholars which wrote, students of him who changed the way that it's done, or even objected some of the ways, rabbis that were against it at all and thought that it's not all, should not be at all studied in this way, and other things like that. So what I'm interested in is to see how we play. And with that, later at some point, to show that, to make it into a discussion about hermeneutics and to the question of can we challenge our understanding of a text, literal sense, etc., and in what ways? I think that's enough in order just to fall into the text. The text is like very typical rabbinical text. It's text about matzah. And the book of Soloveitchik always begins with a certain kind of passage from Rambam, Maimonides, Mishneh Torah, the halachic work, which which is a very convenient place for Maimonides did something with the Yad Chazakah. He tried to replace the Talmud. And the big revenge in Maimonides is that the only thing that his books are used is in order for pilpul, study and understanding the Talmud. No one, I think today, except from a very small group, which I'm not sure even them, takes Maimonides seriously for halakha. So it's only, his book became like a certain source of pilpul. And so I will not discuss now why it's so easy, except from, why it's so common to go there, but just think about the book, Maimonides, that we don't know it's almost impossible to trace the way why he decided why his decisions were like this and not like that text and not like that. It seems like most of the time it's beautifully written, but the moment that you look at any passage of Maimonides and you have some certain knowledge of the tradition, you look at it and say, why? I think like it's a very common of every Talmudist that look at Maimonides. And that's where like many very interesting important rabbinic or Talmudic scholar who tried to explain why Maimonides explained this, decided this and not that, this and that. All of that, I mean, okay, so it's a very open space for interpretational hermeneutical game, which Maimonides provide you, and more than that. I will not get now. We will see, and that's, I want you to be ready for what we are going to do. So we will read the text, simply try to understand each. I brought, the text itself is these 2 pages, Chidushei Rabbeinu Chaim Halevi. It's not distributed? Okay, yes, please. So this is the 2 pages of Chidushei Rabbeinu Chaim Halevi. And then you have also that. These are just sources that he is using, sometimes explicitly, but he just like in a rabbinical Talmudic way, just refers to it. He doesn't really have to tell you everything that's written. You have to know that. So just in order to do the work that everyone will be able to follow the basic of it, and then the discussion will be able, we will be able to see what he's doing. We'll go with it in a very simple, in a very easy reading first of the text. The second point that I wanted to make is that just to prepare you, the text itself, and it's typical to the way he's writing, according to my understanding.
Also, this one.
No, that's perhaps tomorrow. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, this is we'll see. A typical text of Reb Chaim, Soloveitchik, I call him Reb Chaim because that's the way that we learned the Shiva, but I don't know, you can call him Soloveitchik if you wish. The very typical way that it's composed, every passage, like every section that he discussed something, issue of Maimonides, is that he begins with the Maimonides, most of the time asking some question about why Maimonides says like that, it makes no sense or it's problematic and so on. And then, as we'll see here, he makes several rounds of a very traditional, and I will come to the traditional, but what is traditional here? But very traditional rounds of solving the problem. There is hermeneutics before him. There is 1,500 years of hermeneutics, different schools. He begins just like, and he begins in a very, he gives some kind of, I will discuss, I will ask you a question, I will ask a question, I will try to solve the question, I will come to the point where the problem is solved, but then another problem raised, so we have to change, we have to go to, we are again in square one, and then sometimes he does 2, sometimes he does 3, and at some point he comes to a certain kind of what I will try to call an aporia, which shows that yes, you can go like that, but you miss something in the text. And then he comes. Mostly it's like in the last third of the text that he gives. So he gives 2 thirds. And the last said about, I mean, there is no rule for that, but is like he intervenes with his understanding, with his hermeneutics, and then the whole thing has to change, big change, and I think he succeeds to bring a new hermeneutics. What is a text? So that's what we will do. We'll read from the beginning. I hope you will enjoy, I don't know how much you enjoy reading such texts, but we'll try to discuss it first till we come to the to his part. I wish that the text, I mean, in order for it to be real discussion, simple and nice, first, if anyone feels at any point that they don't understand what's going on, that we just passed a stage without understanding, just ask, because we are coming from so many different backgrounds and levels of, so it will be pity to lose any of you at some point, because you don't understand what is God, for instance. Yeah, God is not going to be in the text. It's that is not part of the Talmudic text. Okay. Yeah. I wanted to ask if, I don't know how to do it, those who know how to read the text without feeling not feeling embarrassed, if anyone is ready to read the text, then to read the relationship, and then someone, whenever wants to say what is written, so we'll be able to go step by step without me telling you the whole time what I think you don't know, which you may know and may not. So anyone is ready to begin with reading the text? Please. Thanks. There. Yeah. The text of Reb Chaim, yeah?
עיסת הכלבים, בזמן שהרועים אוכלים ממנה, יוצא בה ידי חובתו. אין הרועים אוכלים ממנה, אין יוצאים בה, שאין זה משומרת לשם מעשה עד כמה שלה. Translate?
Just let's stop, okay? And that is exactly, indeed, if you read just what the Rambam is on this text, the first one, yeah. Okay, let me say something before. I will come back to that tomorrow. I will see what. I think we all know that in Passover there is this thing of matzah, right? We eat matzah. What is matzah is a very complicated issue. Something that we'll never be able to figure out. On top of matzah, those of you who know a bit more know that it's also matzah shmura, a guarded matzah. What is it? Leave it for a moment aside, but let me say something very, very simple, and then we may discuss it again. Because the topic of this discussion is around the concept of guarded matzah. What exactly does that mean? Now, in the Bible, if you look at this page 3, I just quoted the Bible toward the end. והיה באוכלכם מלחם הארץ, תרימו תרומה להשם, ראשית הריסותיכם חלה, תרימו תרומה, כי תרומת הגורם כן תרימו אותה, מראשית הריסותיכם תיתנו לה תרומה לדורותיכם. So it appears twice, but okay, this is a very important part, not for us, not for now. I wanted another text which I don't know. There is a passage in the Bible which says, "Ushmartem et matzot," and you should guard the matzah. What does it mean? Don't ask me because I don't believe in literal sense. But there are many different interpretations that we'll see. In any case, that is the origin of this issue of matzah shmura. You have to do something to the matzah. It's not clear when, it's not clear how, it's not clear why. That's clear what does it mean to guard the matzah, but you do something. And what we know after the Talmudic stage, and it's not clear also in the time of the Talmud what exactly it means, and it becomes clearer only much later. There is a thing that's matzah shmura. Now, those who live in Orthodox, those who live or know Orthodox communities in Europe and not in Europe, and in North Africa and others, you can have, it's an object. You can buy matzah shmura. You go to the shop and say, I don't want matzah, I want matzah shmura, because matzah is not enough. Because if you, the commandment to eat matzah, according to this halachic tradition, on the first night of Passover, is to eat matzah shmura. Although matzah, regular matzah you can eat, but you don't fulfill the commandment of eating the matzah on the first night, if it's not matzah shmura. So there is an object of matzah shmura, or matzah shmura, or whatever you want to call it, and that's what you have to do. So this is in the background of this whole... okay. I thought that you... Yeah, please. Just just a second. Feel free to stop me. If I want to finish something, I will just tell you wait a second.
My understanding of this is that it's not actually about matzah, it's about bread. Like, matzah has to be a type of bread, and we're trying to understand what counts as bread.
Also, we'll see that. I mean, we'll go into the discussion. So, of course, the question of bread is very important, not only here. But just let me tell you, in connection to that, just let me make it more complicated, and we will see a bit of that. But matzah, we are used to think about it as something which is related to Passover, right? When do you eat matzah? On Passover. But that is not true. Matzah you also eat at the temple with certain kind of sacrifice. During the whole year, you have to eat certain kind of thing with matzah, with something which is not leavened, something which is not chametz. So matzah is something which is like, we are so much used to a certain kind of image, but it has, basically, it's not only on Passover. Okay, so that will become also, because the question of bread, of lechem, will become also part of the question of that at some point. Okay, so now please just read the Rambam, and we'll just begin with the basics, and then we'll be able to. Before you go there is a story of those who, if you know Reb Chaim, but especially you don't know Reb Chaim, so those of you who know Reb Chaim, and one of his students, in particular, Reb Bell, were writing text, like always beginning with a very simple thing, like the beginning with the Rambam, with the Maimonides text, and so on. And the thing looks like, sometimes it looks as if they begin like children's, like from the basics, I don't know anything. And then the people who laughed at this tradition said that actually what they had in mind, okay, if it comes to my ideas and it's nonsense, so at least on the way you studied something before you got to me. So that is like, also this text is somehow built like, let's begin with the very simple points and then develop it further. Okay, so if someone is ready, Eliyahu, whatever.
Want to read the Rambam?
Yes, just if you read the Rambam.
From Isakat Halim?
No, from the Daled Hey. Yeah.
From above Dal?
Yeah.
אין לה יוצא ידי חובת אכילת מצה, אלא אם כן אכלה מאחד מחמשת המינים, שנאמר, לא תאכל עליו חמץ, 7 פעמים תאכל עליו מצות. דברים בבלים לידי חימוץ, אם אכלה מצה, יצא בהם ידי חובתו, אבל שאר דברים כמו אורז ודוח הנפיתיות, אין יוצא בהם מצה, לפי שאין בהם חמץ.
Okay. Anyone is ready to say something about this piece? That's before. I mean, I just picked one halacha before our halacha in this text, which discussed the question of matzah and chametz and a few other things. So anyone wants to say what's the point? What are we discussing? Yeah, please.
If it can't become chametz, then it can't be matzah. Only thing that can be unkosher can be kosher as matzah. Not kosher, but and can serve as matzah.
Right. So we begin with a very simple point. Indeed, that's discussing. Maimonides try to define, to organize, to whatever, what will be the right thing to be called matzah, and what can I do? What can I use? And he brings in each time something that he learns from another, that we know from another source. Here he begins with this principle that something that cannot be chametz, something, any thing that cannot be leavened, cannot also be matzah. So in order for something to be matzah, it has to be something that can be chametz. And therefore, or at least that's what he says, these are the things that you can, basically the ingredients of matzah has to be one of these 5 different grains. It's not easy in the of course, but and the other grains cannot be used for matzah because they cannot be chametz. You don't, or rice, for instance, is not leavened according to this tradition. And therefore, if it's true or not, it doesn't, we don't care. Okay, so that is the beginning of that is the beginning of the show. Now, if you can if you read, hey.
העושה סתם מן החיטים ומן האורז, אם יש פתה דגן, יוצא בה ידי חובתו. פיסת החולים, בזמן שהערבים אוכלים ממנה, יוצא בה ידי חובתו. אין הערבים אוכלים ממנה, אין יוצא בה שאין זו משמרת לשם מצה.
Okay, so now let's go indeed to that. There is this dough that is done for, or in a certain way. The translation is already something problematic, but let's say dough that is made for the dogs. And if those who prepare it, the shepherd, ate from that, then you can use it as a matzah for Passover. And if they don't eat from that, then you cannot use it for Passover. And the Maimonides add a reason, which is, okay, leave that alone. He adds this qualification or whatever you want, she'ein zo meshumeret l'shem matzah, that this one is not guarded for the sake of matzah. And our whole discussion, our whole text will be around this, this not guarded for the sake of matzah. How to organize this in a way with this concept of matzah, that's what we're going to work out. Ein zo meshumeret l'shem matzah. Mipnei she'ein zo. Now, you see the issue here? Just think for a second. Try to take this Isata Klavim. There is this, the dog's door, and you have like the, if they eat from it, it can be matzah. If they don't eat from it, they cannot be matzah. And the reason for that, because it's not guarded for the sake of matzah. Now, anyone is ready to give interpretation of that? What exactly does, what do you have in mind? What is this text? Yeah, please.
Well, I think it's having to do with the fact that the Dalet and Hay are outlining the way, like, if something is intended to be food, intended to potentially leaven for human consumption, then that can be matzah. But the primary sort of intention of this Isa is for klavim, not for humans. Yet its secondary possibilities that it can be fed, but that humans can eat from it. Does that qualify it as matzah? Does it need to be primarily for human consumption, or?
Okay, let me go with your direction and let's see if it works. It's not. It's supposed to be for human consumption. Let's leave alone for the second the question: what kind of human consumption it has to be? If it has to be lechem, or if there has to be bread or something else. But just like it has to be. I mean, that makes sense in the first reading. It has to be certain kind of weight for human being and not for dogs. And now we'll come for many questions that will come also later. But the first thing, if that is the case, then what do you do with the qualification which says mipnei she'eina meshumeret l'shem matzah? What is the connection to guarded? Why should it be guarded for matzah? You could just say something which is done for not being a food for human cannot be eaten for matzah because it's not food for human or it's not designed for food. What is the guarding thing here? How does it introduce? It looks like he takes two different kind of logical walls and try to, and just like, and that is typical, by the way, Maimonides, but it just like put them together. And what to do now? How to go with that? How to understand why what is the connection? I mean, if you say that it's for humans, then what is the connection to guarded? If it's a question of guarded, so what do you care if that's is for whom he did it? Yeah.
I guess it's passion. If you like Ishmael, when you have a desire and you don't.
There is, I mean, okay, let me answer to that in two levels. What you say, if I were not now teaching, working with text of Chaim, I would say, working with text of the Talmud, I would say that you have a very interesting point because, and we'll see a bit of that. There is already in the Talmud time, this is the question of what is Matzah Shmura. There is this mitzvah liltot or en mitzvah liltot. If now liltot is the process of preparing the matzah is to take the grains, and one of the process that we do or don't do is to to put the grains in water, so the flour will be better. Yeah, will be cleaner. Will have the best bread, which for them at that time, best bread was considered white bread. So the cleaner the material that you have, the better bread that you have. So the question, and then from the very, you see about matzah several things which related to certain kind of the question of demonic, you can spare behind the demonic, like you are coming very close with matzah shmura to the point of making it chametz, to the point of actually almost making with that chametz, and there are several texts which, and you hold yourself and you keep it unleavened. That is not coming to chametz. Okay, but that is if I were speaking now about the text of the Talmud, I could have gone with such interpretation, but
I mean, the question is, please say why does he mention again men? So men, because man has a desire and the ability to maintain or to refrain from his desire, which means to be small.
Yeah.
Other than other creatures, that's the only reason I can think of. That's what he keeps mentioning.
Okay. Judith, you want to say something? I find there is the issue of men, there is the issue of dogs or animals, as we'll see in other Mishnah, not only the wonderful dogs, but and that's and then there is this question of that's Maimonides bring the Shmira. Let's keep reading. Let's read and see how we develop that into a bit more developed question. Develop the question more and more. Okay, so that is just like the beginning. Okay. Eliav, if you want to keep read Reb Chaim. The text? Sure.
So, you want me to read this quotation of the Rambam or start after?
Reb Chaim. The text.
הוא במשנה חלה, פרק א', עושת הכלבים, בזמן שהערבים אוכלים ממנו, חיילת בחלה, ומערבים בה, ומשתטחים בה, ומברכים עליה, ומזמנים עליה, ונעשה ביום טוב, ויוצא באדם לידי חובתו בפסח. אם אין הערבים אוכלים ממנה, אין הערב בחלה, ואין מערבים בה, ואין משתטחים בה, ואין מברכים עליה, ואין מזמנים עליה, ואין הנעשית ביום טוב, ואין אדם יוצא בה לידי חובתו בפסח.
Okay. So that is really a Mishnah in Chala. You have it here. The text, the second text, is just a quote from the Traktat Chala. And that's what Chaim says. Also, it says, okay, well, how do we know, where does Maimonides take it? To say, there is this discussion in Traktat Chala, in the Mishnah already, that Isat HaKlavim, there is a list of things that apply to that. And apply to that, if the shepherd eat from that, then its own chala. Chala, just for those who are not familiar with the language, chala is not what you buy before Shabbos at the bakery. Chala is one of the, there are certain things that you take out of your food that you make and you give it to the Kohen, and some you give to the priest, and some you have to do other things. Some you have to the Kohen, the priest, and some you have to give to the Levi, and some you give you have to do other things in the temple and so everything. Like for instance, you have you just like got your fruit from your tree. Some of it have to go according to the biblical law. And chala is that thing that you have to take. It's the same it's basically the same spectrum of things that you have to do with food. One of the things that's when you bake something or when you make something into a dough, you have to take a certain portion and to give it to the priest, to the Kohen. And actually it's the property of the Kohen. And that is called challah. That is the meaning. Challah, and if you see challah in the Mishnah or in the Talmud, it has nothing to do with this wonderful spongy, oily bread that we eat on Shabbos. Okay, so we have, if you do something from this dough of the dogs, and it was if the ro'im eat from it. Now, just let me ask you a question. And I know that I'm so used probably for the halachic way of reading, but the first thing that jumps to my eyes when I read this text is ochlim mimena, meaning that they had to eat from that, or that it can be. It could be eaten, or that they planned on eating on that, or that it's the most undefined thing. Like you, as a halachic reader, you look at that text and say, "What does it mean, ochlim mimena?" Do I have to wait till someone will eat from that and then to take the challah out of it, which will be impossible basically because the challah had to take it before it's made into a bread. So what is exactly the story? But okay, let's leave that for a moment as it is, this question, because also about that there are many discussions. We'll come to some of them. But this Mishnah in the Torah of Challah says, if the shepherd eat from that, whatever it means now, this condition, then you can use it as matzah for the first night of Passover, as it's demanded, required, or if not, then not. And then he gives like a certain thing. You can לערב, מערבים בה, משתתפים בה, מברכים עליה, מזמנים עליה, נעשית ביום טוב, יוצאת אדם בידי חובתו. Now, I will not explain all the details here, because it's like, but there are certain things that you do with food. And that you, halachically, that's in the process of halachic, that food is used in halachic procedures that's used for something else. So for instance, just like in order not to get into the whole detail, you have to bless the food. But not everything you bless. If like you eat, it's a question. But if you go outside and eat soil, you are not blessing on that. It has to be a certain kind of thing. Now it says that if the ro'im wanted. If the shepherds eat from that, then you have to use blessing on this food. But if they don't, then you don't bless on that, which is an interesting point. But and so a certain you have a certain list of things that you do, certain thing of things that you don't do. That is the Mishnah. Now, what is missing in the Mishnah? I mean,
the reason? The reason?
Namely?
Because it is not matzah, because it is not bread.
But what is missing from the Maimonides? Guarding, yeah. No trace of this concept of bread, guarding. I mean, there is a list of things that you can do with challah and so on. Nothing, with Isata Klavim, with that, nothing about guarding. So, well, why Maimonides brings this guarding into the discussion? What is the point? Okay. if you, Eliav, if you can keep reading V'chen Pasak in Maimonides.
This is in Chaim or in this one?
In what?
In Reb Chaim.
In Reb Chaim, yes. I don't know how to call it, that it will be easier. That Reb Chaim is the main text. Let's say that, and whenever I refer to that, I will say sources. So otherwise, it's Reb Chaim. Okay.
10 lines down in this paragraph.
Yeah, it's like, if you look, it begins with the Peivav Hala, yeah? And if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In the middle of the 10, V'chen Pasak. 10 line. Huh? וזהו שפסק, first, yes, וזהו שפסק, sorry, yeah.
וזהו שפסק, כן הרמב"ם, אחר לעניין מעשה, וכן פסק גם בפרק כ' בהלכות ביקורים בעניין חלל ומתמיתים. אבל צריך עיון. עד כתב הרמב"ם אחר לגבי מעשה, טעם כפי שאינה משומרת לשם מעשה, והרי נגד פסורה גם מן החלה, מבואר, יכול להכיל כלבים אם בה שם לתמתלה. וכן אין מברכים עליו ואין מזמין עליו ואין ערבים עליו ואין משתתפים בה, כולם משום ליתא דלחמים. ואם כן, הלא הייתה מגופי מוביל גם לעניין הדין המציבה הלכות בפסח. והרי גם מעשה יסוד דימה תלוי בלחם, ולמה נצרך הרמב"ם לטעם הדין המשומרת וצריך עיון.
Okay, so yeah, I will do it now slowly. It's line by line, okay, and then we'll try to understand. But okay, so he says first he quoted this Mishnah in Chala that says Isat HaKlavim en yotze b'yedei chovato b'Pesach, and then he goes to and then he says also the Rambam in Bikurim. Yeah, says the same. Rambam in the relation, and that's you have on the sources. The next text says, Rambam Bikurim, העושה עיסה להאכיל הפת שלה לבהמה או לחיה פטורה. עיסת הכלבים, בזמן שהרועים אוכלים ממנה חייבת בחלה, עיסת העקום פטורה. Here he speaks only on the question of this gift that you give to the Kohen, of this portion that you have to give to the Kohen, chala. And this chala, you have to, he says, if you purposely make it something, bake something just for the sake of animal, you don't take out this portion for the Kohen. It's not, you don't have to, we'll see why. But if you, then he goes, if it's the dog though, then if the shepherd eat from it, it has to you have to take out this portion to give it, and if not, not. So he says, basically, he is consistent in that chala is this way, and that is like kemat nitin. It's like exactly like the Mishnah in chala that we have this list. Ela de tzarich iyun, that was the question that I think was like so obvious, and everyone, most learned, even in Poland in 15th century, people would ask this question. צריך עיון, עד כתב הרמב"ם הכה לגבי מצה, we have to understand, צריך עיון is the classical terms of the Ashkenazic, mostly, later it becomes also, but it's like in Ashkenazic literature, צריך עיון is the beginning of the question. Now I have to explain because something is problematic with the text. The text is not clear, or the text contradicts. So you begin with צריך עיון. I have to, I don't know how to translate it even. What? No, but it was like mostly like it became like a technical term with the Tosfot, and then it became like, of course, there is the Ramban, and so let's take this tradition and make it something else. But it begins with, I think, with Tosfot. It becomes such a technical term with the Tosfot. Yeah, I have something like that. I'm not sure how to, but it's a very technical term. Yeah, you have a problem in the text, צריך עיון. Now I have to explain why, and what do I have to explain? That's here, sorry, הדה כתב הרמב"ם, that's the Rambam wrote, here, לגבי מצה, about מצה, תמה, the reason, because לפי שאינה משומרת לשם מצה, because it's not guarded for מצה. Why do I have that? והרי, and anyway, or the problem is, מהדה פטורה גם מנחלה, from the fact that I see that it's also, that I don't have to give the halal, I don't have to give to the portion to the coin, I don't have, פטורה מנחלה, מבואר, from that you see that the logic of this Mishnah is that everything that לכל אכילת כלבים אין בשם לחם כלל, that's everything that goes for the dog, or for that you make for the dog, that it's not a bread, and therefore you don't have, and only bread you have to take challah out of it. But something that you don't make for it bread, you don't have to take challah out of it. So that is clearly, that's the logic, and also matzah is bread. So of course, if you make it not as a bread, if it's not bread, you don't have to give challah. And now, and then he says in just like that's the Mishnah says, and mevarchim alea, and mezamnim alea, and me'arvim ba, and mishtafim ba. Why that the Mishnah says all of these things that you cannot do from that? Kulhu mishum leita delechem ba ninu. All of that is because the first thing, that's the first round of his work, says all of that is because it doesn't have the name of bread, and therefore you cannot, you don't have to do that if it's for the dogs. ואם כן, הלא היי טעמה, and if you take this seriously, the Mishnah, then this reason is also good for the reason that I cannot use it in Passover. So, because the הרי גם מצה יסוד דינה תלוי בלחם, because also מצה is לחם. מצה, the מצה is bread. It has to be bread. There are, perhaps we will touch some of the discussion of that already in Talmud. Matzah has to be, matzah is bread. So if it's not bread, then it cannot be matzah. So why do you have to go? And therefore, למה הוצרך הרמב"ם? Why the Maimonides had to go in such an awkward way and bring in another reason, that is that it's not guarded for the sake of matzah, when it's not bread at all. I mean, what do I care? It's not bread, so why do you even mention that? It's like, so that is a very classical, typical, simple question, Talmudic interpretation of the Talmud question, right? It's not anything special about the pioneer. That is like the beginning. And now,
Can you say something about the term mo'il? How it's clear or general? Because
okay, sorry. I have to say something perhaps about this Hebrew in general. Some of you, I discussed in different times of my life these issues. He writes in modern, okay, I'm not going to dedicate for that more than 3 minutes because it's a subject for many discussion, political and not political. There is the concept of modern Hebrew, right? You probably heard this concept. The concept of modern Hebrew is used mostly, and if you say, what is modern Hebrew? And I hear it the whole time people say, modern Hebrew is Ivrit, is what people speak in Israel. Well, that is false. Modern Hebrew exists much before Israel, exists nothing to do with Zionism, exists, I think it begins with Ramchal, with Luzzatto. I think this is the first book that was written in a text that looks like a modern language in Hebrew, Ramchal. But modern Hebrew is Hasidic Hebrew, modern Hebrew is North African Hebrew, modern Hebrew is Iraqi shoots in that time, whatever you wish at that time, there is a new wave of Hebrew, which is not the same as it used before. And that is also modern Hebrew, although, and that's the point, because that is typical Ashkenazic modern Hebrew at that time, which is not entirely taken out of the modern Israeli Hebrew, which is this combination of Aramaic and Rabbinic Hebrew at that time. Mo'il is one of these words which is used in this kind of literature, although it comes before. You can find it already earlier. But I even don't know how to translate it. It's like a legal term, yeah? It's not like mo'il, it helps, but it not helps here, right? How it's translated, I don't know.
Works for. It's red, it's also red. That's what. Mo'il has a very wide amount.
Yeah. It has.
And I think here it's an technical.
You're right.
In the logical structure.
You are absolutely right. It's like a technical term here. Perhaps works for. I really have problem translate such words because these terms plays like a special role. Mo'il.
It's almost like sufficient.
Sufficient, yeah. Here it will be sufficient. Perhaps will be the first translation at that moment. Yeah, legally sufficient. I don't know how to halachically sufficient.
It gets the job done.
Yeah, something like that. But you can see also that there is already one term that the term appears before. And also explicitly for that, but this is a term that is one of the technical terms of Soloveitchik's terms that he invents, and she'en ba shem lechem. Now, shem lechem is not an invention of the Chaim, but he is already using it, I suspect, in his way. And we will see that the term name become a very important thing in his hermeneutics. What is the name of something? And here, I don't think he uses it in the old way, which I don't want to define now, but in his own way, which really has to do with something that is a name of something. Now, without saying exactly what is name, but a name of something or a name that's applied to something, or it's not like, we'll come to that, but we can keep it in the background. There are different concepts here that he will use, and I will just mention, and I will not discuss because it will be too much but there are a few concepts that I want to discuss. So I will, Okay, but the question, yes.
Yeah, I was also wondering if it just seems like from how Soloveitchik sort of pairing Shmirat Matzah with these other sort of halachot that apply to lechem, that Shmirat Matzah is actually like a material active process rather than a sort of refrain or something. And I just wonder if either Rambam spells out what the halachot of Shmirat Matzah are, or if that's what we're sort of coming to better understand.
Okay, I will try to, take it as a moment as an abstract concept, okay, without knowing what it means. I think tomorrow I will come to that a bit more, just to give the short, the issue is that, let me put it this way. Soloveitchik, and that is also typical, he is discussing something very marginal. Who cares about Isat HaKlavim, about some, it's typical to him to go to something very non-central to the text at all. And to try to give light to the main subject through this marginal issue. It's a very typical way that he's doing this. Most of his chidushim are things that even the yeshivot after him, if you look after him at the yeshivot and you see at the book, that most of his chidushim have nothing to do with the curricula of those who study according to him. And but the way that he does it is that almost always, everything marginal that he discusses, he sheds some light on the central concept in this coming from the margin. It's a very interesting way of discussing text. I think he does it also here, that he actually does discuss aesthetics of him, but then he comes to discuss, we'll see, this comes to discuss matzah shmura, lechem, and a central concept for the issue of Passover, yeah? Through that very marginal Mishnah, that's really no one, I think, ever stood. I mean, I don't think anyone, you see how marginal it is. I wouldn't say it like that, but you see that's already neither the Babylonian nor the Yerushalmi had any clue what some of the simple questions that I asked, and we'll see this, like for instance, what does it mean, Isat HaKlavim, in terms of when the Ro'im Ochlim? So the Isat HaKlavim, it's another question that's come immediately if you have a lachet mind like the Yerushalmi, like Bavli. Does it have to be something in this door that is different? Or the door can be the same, but still it will be, so it's like, the questions here is as if you look the different options of the interpretation, you have very different halach subject at all. How do you interpret this text? And I think it's really a marginal, imagine that's, those who don't know, those who are not used to read Talmud. The Talmud itself discusses mostly marginal issues, and that is marginal to the marginal, okay? Call it like that. Okay. Ready?
Yes, a technical question. Before coming later on to establish a term of din lechem, I wanted to know if a letter the lechem, it's also this term.
I don't think later is a Greek term. I think also that is a problem for historians, can enlighten us. I have the feeling always when I read the text of time that there is a hand that was editing it. I mean, of course there was a hand, they are even admitting it, the sons and so. Okay, let me just give you the story about this text. Reb Chaim was working the whole life, was giving like countless of lectures, I mean, really thousands of them during his life. He wrote one book his whole life, and he didn't publish it because he was working on the book. During his lifetime, there were already books of students that became very important heads of yeshivas in Europe. After the Volozhin was closed, most of the yeshivas of Europe were students, or not most, but many of the central yeshivas that came in Lithuania were headed by students of Soloveitchik, which he just lived in Briskin, was teaching there, but the main yeshivas like Mir, like Slobodka, like all of them are under the influence of Soloveitchik. And the way of studying as if became like in 2 decades, it took over the way of studying Talmud in the Ashkenazic, except from some people who really disliked it in Hungary, like they had like their own tradition, and some Hasidic yeshivas that kept studying Hasidic, but anything which was like belonged to the Mitnagdik world became like, except again from certain kind of, which I'm not discussing, like Chazon Ish and so on, which were not part of this game. But we'll not discuss it now. But why did I come to that? You ask if later. Okay, so I don't know. I have the feeling here always when I read it, this later, it's like, I'm not sure even if I formulated it. Something is like, yeah. break?
Do we want to take?
Yes, of course.
Thank you, Ethan.
We won't break more than anything else. Okay, we'll see you later.
So we will meet again in 4:30.
Let's go back to the most important issue that civilized society ever discussed, which is the door of the dog. We are. Let's just repeat what we did and see if it makes sense. What is important, I think, it will be important in a way that's Soloveitchik will discuss it later, is to be a bit at the moment to be reflexive at the moment reflects it only in the back of your mind about the process of the analysis of the text that we are doing. Okay, the text is Maimonides. Yeah. Now, what he did is to take Maimonides, to quote it, to say, it probably comes, I have to find the origin of this text. That's this decent move, right? Where does this text come from when Maimonides decide this way? So he says, okay, let's go back to the Mishnah, Traktat Chala, and you basically find the same idea there. And you also see that Maimonides is consistent here with what he said in another place concerning the taking this Mishnah seriously, namely the question of Chala. So Maimonides also about in the part of on Bikurim says the same thing, that it's if Isata Klavim in the case the dogdo in the case of the shepherd eat from that or don't eat from that. So that sounds like a reasonable way to try to trace back the Maimonides text and to try to understand the logic of that. Right? Just think about it also in the back of your head as what we are doing as people who do hermeneutics. And I think that's partly the game of Soloveitchik. It's not like out of the whole, it will be very important to keep remembering what you were doing. So we are tracing back. We're going back to Chala. And then he says the very obvious question, and we said, and I think also it's like a very reasonable move for every hermeneutician to say, okay, and then how to understand these two parts of Maimonides' text. On the one hand, the logic of Isata Ro'im, the dog door, which the dog door that's the shepherds eat or do not eat. That is the distinction. How to combine it with the second qualification, the second section, which says guarded for matzah, guarded for the name of matzah or not guarded. The name here is like a problem. Guarded for matzah or not guarded for matzah. Apparently, as he asked, and that is a very good question, that I think if you think about it, does it make sense to ask the question? Like as someone who reads text, think about the reader, that he's doing the work of reading. That is our subject, right? For us. And he's asking, the reader asks, okay, there are two kinds of logic here. One goes with the reason animal for human, other goes for guarded for the name of guarded for matzah. Why does he bring it together? It doesn't make any sense to bring the other part when you already know that it's not lechem, that it's not bread, and that's explained all the cases. So why do we have to bring something new which doesn't contribute anything to the text? I think up to here, it's like if you are the reader of Maimonides, you do the same. Or any reasonable serious reader of the text will do the same. Yeah, doesn't matter what are your background. A reader supposedly will do that. Okay, so we are tracing back Maimonides and trying to understand if it's consistent. And we found that it's not consistent. First moment, and now we will try to show that perhaps it's possible still to explain how these two lines of thought are consistent with each other. Let's see his first move, which is still entirely classical reading of a text in rabbinical tradition, especially in his time. No one would be surprised to hear there is nothing unique about the reading of Soloveitchik. He knows how to do it. Like every Rosh Yeshiva, every head of yeshiva should know how to do it. I mean, to do this, yes.
And what if he does not? I mean, I suppose he takes the cases where he manages to resolve or find the consistency. But what if he does not find the consistency? Can he live with that? Like, how does he do that?
Okay, the tradition of Soloveitchik is not only that he can live with that, he will be the happiest person in the world. Yeah, if he succeeds to show there are a book of Rabbi Akiva Eger is like one generation before, 1.5, 2. Yeah, like one of the most Talmudic. Yeah, so one of the most important Talmudic scholars in Lithuania, very brilliant guy, who wrote a book that's it's called Sefer Kushiyot Atzumot. No, apart from that, Sefer Kushiyot Atzumot, that came as but anyway, and it's a book of this great Talmudic scholar, which all contradiction that he finds in the Talmud, and he thinks that there are no solutions for that, and there is a tradition that anyone who tries to find solution for that doesn't understand the logic of, is an idiot. Yeah, that is the kind of this tradition. Yes?
That's debatable. Naturally, he thinks there's no answer. He thinks that it's very difficult to find an answer, right?
Or yes or no. I mean, you know, he would not say there is no answer, but of course he's like very happy to publish it as a question without any problem.
He wishes that people will find the answer. The tradition we're talking about is later and also has some more motivation.
Of course.
I think they do assume that there's no inconsistencies.
Yes, but I do not take that for sure, because you take here. Yeah, okay. I will not argue about that, but for sure, one thing you would agree with me is that they live very well and very proudly with this situation. To say that I found a question that no other rabbis can find a solution for that, I'm very serious. It's not like I have a problem with God. It's a question with the rabbi, with the Talmudic scholar around. I'm the best. You cannot answer the question. So Soloveitchik will be very pleased. Although Soloveitchik goes in a different direction, we'll see it only in his hermeneutics of what is a question and what is an answer. And I said that there is a joke that's told about his father. Soloveitchik's father was also a very known Talmudic scholar, extremely known. I mean, very important at that time. And the story is that his father says to someone about his son, and I think his father, it's, of course it's a story, so I don't know, but it captures something that's probably his father captured about his son, that he didn't understand what he's doing in a new way of reading that he's doing. And the story goes that his father says, students come to me and ask questions. And I work very hard and find a solution and find an answer. And then he's going happy home. He had a good question. I'm going happy home. I am a rabbi who can give wonderful answers, sophisticated one. That is my case. And my sons, meaning our Soloveitchik, students come to him and ask a question. And then he shows him that there is no question. And then the student goes home sad because he had no question. And the Rabbi goes back sad because he has no answer. And that is his world. Now, the point is a joke, or if it's true or not, I don't know if he told about it. But the point is that he's capturing something that perhaps we'll talk more in the third meeting, in the third day, the more than we come to close these issues, about this kind of hermeneutics that question also the very issue of the question. Okay, that's what the question is itself an issue. Shan, please. Yeah. Okay. So that is the place where now we begin with another very traditional round. Again, like very traditional, how to solve the issue. Again, every rabbi, a Talmudic scholar could have come with what we will see now. Have in your mind the whole time if it's something that you would accept or not, or at least worth trying in terms of solving the problem that we faced with the text in Maimonides. Someone else instead of, yeah, please. והנה הרש. Just a second. Arash is Rabbi Shimshon Mishantz. There are, as you know, there are 6 orders seder of Mishnah. On some of them we don't have Bavli. Arash, he's one of the Tosafit, a brilliant mind. And I think, I mean, you can think otherwise. I think he tried to take this Sdarim and to invent a certain kind of Talmudic discussion of the Mishnah. Because if you read the Mishnah by itself, I don't know if you happen to read Mishnah by itself. Some of you, yes, because you're scholars. So you have first time that I read the Mishnah by itself without Gemara, not as a kid, but as an adult, I found, what is this idiotic text? It doesn't make any sense. And then you read Talmud and you see that without the Talmud, it's like, and I think the Rash, Rabbi Shimshon Mishantz, this Tosafit in the medieval, 13th century? 12th, 13th century? 13th century? Yeah. So this chance. So this Tosafit, he's like saying he's taking this Mishnah. That is the way that I see it, and try to invent a certain kind of thing that we will be able to use this text as a kind of Babylonian Talmud. So after you read, and actually what he's doing now is exactly that. He's taking him as a source of interpretation of the Mishnah. He's like he's jumping the whole time from the Mishnah till medieval Ashkenaz and going immediately. Yes, so the Mishnah says like that, and Rash Mishantz explained like that, as if it is Talmud so he succeeded very well for some thing. Okay, so in Arash. ספרי זוטה. Okay, I'm sorry, I will have to just to make ספרי זוטה is midrash. Sifri, which doesn't exist, was collected from other places, mainly I think Yalkut Shimoni and things like that. What? No, say. No. What? Anyway, Sifri Zuta, as much as I remember, is a midrash that doesn't exist, not like the Sifri. And we have it only from a collection from other midrashim that were collected into that and called Sifri Zuta, which is drashot for Rabbi Shmuel, which are not in the Sifri. So the Rash himself quotes this midrash. Yeah, the Rabbi Shimshon Mishantz quotes this Mishnah, Sifri Zuta. That's what he quotes. Yeah. Okay, what does it mean? Okay, now you have this text from the Bible in the source pages, page 3, almost at the bottom of page 3 of the sources. והיה באוכלכם מלחם הארץ תרימו תרומה להשם, ראשית הריסותיכם תרימו תרומה, כי תרומת גורן כן תרימו אותה, מראשית הריסותיכם תיתנו לה תרומה לדורותיכם. So we have here something about arisa, something that's never mind what it means now, but from what are you going to give the challah, the portion of challah, which is truma, which is this kind of thing that you give to the Kohen. And he says, and then the Sifri, that's Rabbi Shimon quotes, Rabbi Shimon Mishan's quote, Aristoteichem, in the text, in the biblical text, it's written, that is Midrash Halacha, early Midrash Halacha. We are not discussing Midrash Halacha, so you can take it or leave it, but this is not Aristoteichem. And it's a typical Midrash, says Aristoteichem Shelachem. Why is this plural? The Aristoteichem. And it says Shelachem is not plural. Not plural. Shiuch, genitive. This possessive, this affiliation that it creates between you and this thing, and it says you in contrast to what? So you in contrast, Kelev. Yeah? You have to, what is written, if you look at the Bible and you say why it's written that, so what the Bible is saying is that according to this early Midrash interpretation, it belongs to you and not in the case that it's supposed to be for the dog. Okay, so that is the explanation of the Mishnah according to Rabbi Shimon Mishan's. Because remember, we have the Mishnah that says for Kelev, if it's for Kelev, it's not. If it's for dogs, it's not. If it's for if they eat from that, it is. And you ask why? Why? And Rabbi Shimon Mishan's add this midrash, this reading of the text, to the issue. Now, this is a new point that Soloveitchik could bring, a new shift. So think about what happens here. We have Mishnah, we have Rambam. Rambam says like the Mishnah, right? And additional thing. And we have the question on the Rambam. Let's go with the Mishnah and see what happened there. The Mishnah. So what is the logic behind the Mishnah? So the first thing that Soloveitchik does, it says it's lechem, right? What is lechem? It's on. What is not is not. Now, then he quotes now at this stage, Rabbi Shimon Mishan's the first interpretation that's as if the first interpretation that we have this Mishnah, which attributes the logic of that to this drasha, to this interpretation of the biblical text. You are not dogs. Okay? Now we'll see how Soloveitchik play with that. Go on.
ואם כן, יש לומר, וגם בזמן שאין הרואים אוכלים ממנה, לא פקע ממנה שם לחם, ועד הסתירה מן החלה, הוא רק משום גזרת הכתוב דאריסותיכם, ובעינה שדעה עומדת לאכילת אדם.
Okay, let's translate it, and then I translate and you explain. Because now it's the new round. So it says, that says Arash, that says Rabbi Shimon Mishan's. And now it says Soloveitchik, and if you follow this logic, we have to say the following. You have to be committed to the following interpretation. Also, when the shepherd do not eat from that, it still has the name of, it still is bread. Because the first explanation that we had says, okay, bread is what is eaten, non-bread is what is not eaten, right? Now he says, if you take this medieval interpretation of the text from Rabbi Shimon Mishan's that takes the Sifri to that, then it means that the Mishnah says, not the bread, but even if that is not bread, it has to be eaten. Why? Now the question is to you. What is the logic in what he's saying? Let's see if it works. No, anyone who is feeling close to dogs and doors.
So what's the question?
Why is he? Why? If the dogs, sorry, if the he says, if you take this midrash, Aristoteichem, that it has to be from yours and not from the dog, or to you and not to the dog, that for you, etc. Then it means that lo pakam min Hashem lechem, that it still can be considered bread. And that's what you conclude from that's what Rabbi Shimon added. Now, how can you conclude from that Rabbi Shimon only said Aristoteichem, Shelachem, and not from others? I will bring, there is a whiteboard there. For the sake of clarity, I mean, I think it will be much easier. Whiteboard.
I mean, does this refer in any way to the Mishnah again? Because if it does, then the explanation would be if it's made of the grains which, when leavened, which can be leavened. So if what the dog eats is made of grains which can be leavened, then that's why. Maybe.
Just a second, I will just put it. I can put this in the. Okay, he says like that. Shine, you can see it. We have the first explanation that we have to say there is the Mishnah, right? Mishnah, Halach, and it says we have a list of things, and we said because all of these things, including that, because it's not bread. That's the point, right? What is bread? It's fine, but it's not bread, it's not fine. That was the first naive interpretation that we gave. Okay? So that was perfect. But here we came to the problem that he said, if it's bread, then Maimonides' point about Meshumeret, about guarded, makes no sense. We don't need both bread and guarded. So, Meshumeret or guarded, that's false. And then our explanation for Maimonides is that. Now we'll try again. And he says, look at the Mishnah Halal, which was this list. Halal, Matzah, Mvarchim, Mezamnim, etc., etc. Work on all of that and forget for a second the question of, not forget, try to see, take Mishnah, okay, plus Rash and Sifri, Zuta. Okay? Because the important here is not the Midrash, the important is that Rash take that as an explanation of the Mishnah. We have the Mishnah with the list, and then the Rash says how to explain this Mishnah. Explain according to the Sifri. What does it mean? That Aristoteichem, whatever, there is a special drasha, or drasha, and interpretation. And accordingly, and that's the first thing that's already to conclude from that, is that we have to take away the explanation of Lechem.
Maybe the explanation is not the explanation is different explanations.
How is that?
You have to conclude. You just said maybe if you have
can you read?
How does it say?
Yeah.
ואם כן יש לומר, גם בזמן שאין לו בפוקת משנה, יש לומר עצמאי.
ואם כן יש לומר.
And this context is made.
I'm not sure. That's the second point. But yeah, I mean, that is sublime. That is he's just then he goes. Okay, just for a second with that, go to that. I think he said in Kenya Shlomar, I think it's a very strong thing. He says if you take these 2 points together, then you have to throw away the explanation of letter. Why? first, before, even if you say it's just an option, I think it's strong, you know, but even if you say it's just like a weak explanation, why do we have to get rid of lechem? Why can you be could? Why
we have what he uses there also just says that if it could be here, if it's not special for a person, it's special for God.
Okay, so the point is like that. He says, look how I studied this text. I add this term, which is zerat hakosov, zerat hakatuv. Sorry, which also is a technical term, the way the Solvich use it. I'm not going to discuss it here. But the point is, I think it's, and the point is, remember, what I want us to think about ourselves, how we are going to do it. If you take the Mishnah and you say, okay, what is the logic then of the Mishnah? And you look at the Rash, the one of the main standard, perhaps the main standard interpretation of Mishnah Chalaf for any Ashkenazi Jew. Then he says, why does the Rash read this drasha? Why doesn't he just say it's not lechem? Everyone knows that something that is not lechem cannot be matzah, right? That was the logic. But he brings something else. If he brings something else, you can conclude that he doesn't think that is the point of lechem. Okay, at least according to the way that the Rash understands, if the Rash takes the Mishnah and explains it by the point that there is drasha, then why does he need another way to study it if it's clear that it's not lechem? Yeah.
Just to put it differently, but it seems like every explanation excludes every other possible explanation.
Not always, but here, yes.
One which is bread, but it's also false.
And if it says your bread and then this is on your, then we forget about the bread.
China. Yes, so here it will be like that. If the Rash is so important to him to bring Midrash, then it's probably because he thinks that the lechem doesn't do the work.
And where, in which Mishnah are we talking about? Because in Mishnah 1:5, there's no mention of bread.
No. There is no mention of bread, but we said we are now talking about our interpretation. Our interpretation, the last round, was like why challah and matzah will not be, in the case of isat klavim of the dog door, will not be will not have to have challah, or you cannot use it as matzah. And we said the first thing that came to our mind is that because matzah is lechem and challah you also take from lechem, and something which is like dog door is not going to be bread. So now he says, okay, but if you follow formally, just look at the way that interpretation works. If someone brings a special explanation for the text, then it's because he is not happy with the other explanation. He doesn't accept it. So if you follow this line of reasoning, then this line of interpretation, then you don't need that. So forget for a second about lechem. So go on. Eli.
בין מברכים, בין מזמנים, בין מערבים, בין משתתפים. משתתפים, זה כלל. כיוון דעה במילה דרבון. ועל כן, והנה הוא דווקא מיוחד במאכל אתה.
מילה וחי.
מילה וחי, לא חשוב אוכל כלל. והחינוך חכמה דהם משתתפים בה. ולגבי שיתוף לא בעניין כלל לחם. רק בכל שהוא אוכל, משתתפים.
אוכל.
רק בכל שהוא אוכל משתתפים. ועל כוחו, ועל כוחו מודעים משום בשיתוף ברבון, ועל כן לא חשיב לעניין זה אופן כלל. ולאחי באמת, בעניין דבר חלה,
Okay, so just a second. Here I will skip the discussion, just will tell you, because otherwise it will take long and it's not important for the text. It's like a side comment. He says, okay, there is a whole list. First, I showed you that if you follow the logic of Rabbi Shimshon, then you have to say that it's not because it's not bread, it's something else. And he says that's because of the way that they study the text formally in this midrash. Okay, but in this Mishnah Chala, we have seen that there is a whole list of things. One of them was challah, that the thing that you give to the Kohen. One of them was matzah, and there was a whole list of other things, and mevarchim, and mezamim, etc., etc. So he says, what about all of these other things? And he says, indeed, if you look at these things, they have nothing to do with the question of lechem. They are, one thing, you don't even need lechem. It's only ochel. Other thing, and so on. So he says, forget, he gives some guide. We are left with two things. That's the point that he says. And you can accept it or not. I think it's, for that you have to trust me for a moment, or anyone who is read it very fast, that it makes sense to say, okay, there are two things here which are really interesting for us. It's one is challah and one is matzah. One is the portion. Both of them are things that they are a real mitzvah or real thing from, and both of them, and the rest leave them alone from the list. Now let's focus on them. And then he says these both things you only do not because they are not lechem, but because of the midrash. So, well, any questions? Okay, so go on. The midrash, what the midrash we already read. The midrash is what Rabbi Shimshon Mishan's quotes the Sifri Zuta, midrash which doesn't exist. I mean, it exists, but it exists without existence. And as far as I know, Elchanan said something which I don't know what he said, but perhaps he found a copy of the midrash of Sifri Zuta in his library. What he says? What is? Yes. Well. But yeah, but it's a collection, no?
Yes, it's a collection.
Yeah.
It's not
that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm saying that that's what I said. That it's not like the Sifri original, which is a real. It's like Sifri Zuta, which is actually just someone collected. I think quite early, no? I mean, Rash Mishans knows that. Yeah. Okay, so we are still in the logical way now, and the problem is, and now again, I'm asking you to think as a person that wants to read the text and goes back to the Mishnah and then find the problem like Soloveitchik. Here, you could have said, okay, I'm going with Maimonides. I don't know what the Rash Mishan said. I couldn't care less. Perhaps I will keep going with, but he doesn't do it. If you want to accept it or not, it's up to you. But I think it's at least reasonable to trace it back and to say, okay, this is a common knowledge for anyone who at least, not at Maimonides' time perhaps, but at least after Maimonides, when you have all the text, common knowledge what the Sifri says. It's not like something like, so if the Rash Mishans connected, at least if you follow the Rash Mishans, you have to worry about the following issues.
ואחי באמת, והנה מדבר חלה, טעמה אחרים, מצד הריסותיכם, פרט להצעת חלבים, משום דמין התורה, לא פקע מן השם לחם. ושלפי זה, אני מיכה להוסיף הרמב"ם לגבי מצא טעמה בינה משומרת לשם מצא. כיוון שבאמת הוא חשוב לחם גמור. והגדרת הכתוב לגבי חלה בעניין שיעשו לאכילת אדם, לא מצינו את זה מצא. משום מה, בצורת הרמב"ם, זה מצא לטעם בינה משומרת לשם מצא.
Okay, let me translate it and you explain. Now he says, remember, now the last round was to destroy we tried to explain according to the tractate, then we said it doesn't work. Now he tries again to explain, this should be the way that it's explained. So, what does he say? He says, and because of that, we really need for in the case of challah, not the case of matzah, but the case of the portion for the Kohen, we need another reason, because lechem, everything is lechem. That is not the issue. What is the reason? Is the drasha from the text, Arisotichem, etc. That should be yours and not that one which is supposed to be of the dog. Why? Because the name lechem still, everything still is there. Even if it's for dog, it still has the name lechem. That was the way that we assume in this round, right? Because we saw that it's problematic. And according to that, he says, that's, please, your turn to interpret. If that is our assumption, he says, according to that, the text that we read from the Rambam makes sense. What does it mean make sense, he says? This is the reason that the Rambam added that it's not guarded for matzah. Why? Because it's really considered to be bread, and this drasha, specific drasha that we studied, it's only about challah, about this portion. But about matzah, we have no reason. So how does he explain the Mishnah now? And the Rambam. Yes, it's very simple, but just like I want to follow the way that he wants and to ask. My question is the whole time, let's trace the way that he does it, and let's say, is it a reasonable way to do an interpretation? Not if that is the interpretation of the text, but if you would have to do an analysis of text, would you accept such a way of doing it? Later we will ask, what does it mean to accept such a way? And I think then he will show us that everything that we do and think that is reasonable, it's like based on something which we should not accept. But that is later. That is the important stage that will come later. Now we follow what we generally do. So I think, okay, someone want to just to explain it in simple words?
He's not trying to define here.
Seems to me that
He's not trying to define that differentiation, but rather to eliminate. So not committed to say anything positive about what is either left in challah or in meno. He just said that it had to do with something else. That has nothing to do with matzah. So it's not going to any full text of fixed meaning or something like that, if that's what you're looking.
Yeah, I would say perhaps in a different way. Perhaps he's like, at this moment, he's more interested in the formality of interpretation, not of his, but the way that I said, it's like, what are the formalities of interpretation? So we have like Mishnah, we have to explain what is the reason of the Mishnah. If you accept the explanation of the Rash, then you cannot say, then it cannot be because it's lechem. If it's not lechem, then it's something else behind it. What can it be? It can be the drash of the Rash, the drasha of the Rabbi Shimshon. If it's the drasha of Rabbi Shimshon, then it applies to challah, to the portion or that of the Kohen, but it's not, you cannot take it in the case of matzah, because it's specifically to challah. That is the way that you have it written in the Bible, Arisotechem, about challah, not about matzah. If that is the case, then let's go back to Maimonides. Maimonides says challah and matzah. Why challah? Challah because of this interpretation of the Bible, but why matzah? And that is actually the question of Maimonides on the Mishnah. Basically, Maimonides look at the Mishnah and say, there is a list here. The Mishnah doesn't give any reasoning. So it's just a list. The list doesn't contain the reasoning if you don't accept the lechem. Then one of the question of challah is like we explained from the drasha from Sifri. But Maimonides, who right now the discussion about matzah, it's not in the list. He writes now discussion specifically about matzah. he has to account for the same as halal, why it's not, and then he invents this thing that she'ena meshumeret l'shem matzah. There is something specific about matzah. Yeah, up to here, it's just formalities. We have no, nothing of discussion of what is meshumeret, what is guarded, who cares, what is matzah, what is, I don't care about anything. He just look at you and says, how do you think about these things? And I think up to now, he depicts very well at least any Rosh Yeshiva at that time that will do limud. But I think every one of us, like you look at the text, you find something which you say, why is it here? You try to find a reason why it's there. You said, okay, because that's the first part, it doesn't enough. So you add something else. And the added thing is that's exactly what he shows. So he follows the way that we, normal modern people, or non-normal model people or whatever do reasoning. And I think he follows the way that every Talmudic scholar in his time would do that in a very simple way. It's not like something sophisticated up to. Agree or not agree? I mean, if you don't agree, then you have to say, because otherwise the whole building that I'm trying to, yeah.
So basically, you said that Rambam came up with this new addition to the law because of he found himself with dead end in terms of interpreting the Mishnah. So Rambam could do that.
No, he said, look, Rambam is in, if I understand well your question, so if it's not, then tell me that I didn't answer your question. The Rambam is also, and we see that here, but the Rambam also interpret a great wrote a great commentary on the Mishnah. And now what he has about this, it's interesting, but all of these things is coming only in the Mishnah. We don't really have, we have Mishnah and we have Yerushalmi about that a bit. Now, the Rambam himself basically looks like, if you look at the text, it looks like he copied the text from the Mishnah, dissected it into different dinim, because challah is in the case of challah, netzah is in the case of matzah, and that's what we are discussing here. And then the Rambam is a commentator of the Mishnah, so it makes sense that he had some understanding of the Mishnah that he quotes, and what will be this understanding will be this understanding that makes him add this kind of qualification, which means that it's not guarded for the sake of matzah. And he says, I think that because challah is specific, and the rest of the Mishnah is just a list which is entirely irrelevant. You have to trust me that he's right about that. And then we are left with matzah. And therefore he says, matzah, he added this she'ena meshumeret l'shem matzah. Where does he take it from? We'll see. And if it makes sense, we'll see. And then we'll also see better what is matzah. But up to now, it just leads to say, is it a reasonable way to follow Maimonides' way of thinking? Yeah. So someone writes a text, add something, and then how do you try to understand it? You say, okay, I want to understand why he did it. And you find some former source, you find some principle, you find some, I don't know, that he wants to make money out of it, whatever reason that you want. But if you're a historian, you say that he's corrupted. But the point that I'm stressing is what important is not what the text, it's not the interpretation, but it's reasonable to think that this is the kind of reasonable interpretation. That this is basically, you don't have to do exactly the same, but basically these are the steps that you follow as someone who does hermeneutics. Okay, that is what I'm pushing the whole time. And I think up to now, it's not bad. Yes. Point.
I think it's reasonable if you assume that a text like the Mishnah is not to be taken at face value, and there's a sort of secret world of concepts going on behind that you can then reconstruct based on little fragments of hints from the Rosh Hashanah or whatever. Like you have to be ready to ignore any indication that when a bunch of topics appear in the same paragraph, they're talking about the same thing.
Right. I think you're entirely right. And I think absolutely. And I think therefore it makes more sense what he says, because he's not trying to explain the Mishnah. He's trying to explain Maimonides' mind. And probably, I never looked at Maimonides' mind, but Maimonides probably had or at least it makes sense to think that the Maimonides I don't know, structure of the way that he structured the halacha is that is more Talmudic, and so then just like the Mishnah had concept that we don't know what they are. Because also when you look into Rosh Mishnah and you look other places what he say, he basically takes the Talmud to be a reason for what happens in the Mishnah. So if you want to understand the Mishnah, you have to understand the Talmud or the Midrash Halacha or something like that. And Maimonides himself quotes many Midrash Halacha in order to explain Mishnah many times. As much as I remember. So in that case, what you say is exactly, I mean, I think, yes, but what we are trying to explain is not the Mishnah, is the Maimonides. And Maimonides accept exactly these stories about the Mishnah. So it would be
it could be the reason he withdraws from this right away in the next line is because of Abinav's question.
Meaning?
He goes back, he said that even if you do the example, it's still because problem of lechem. So he does basically say that it's not so reasonable to see them as different reasons. I think the reason he does this whole thing is to show that the Imam is right. If you read the Mishnah, you have to see that it's one principle behind the whole.
Yeah, but the principle that you name is principle of lechem, and principle of lechem is definitely not definitely. Principle of lechem is most likely, to my understanding, is much later than the Mishnah. It's like very Talmudic thing, and okay. I mean, there is this concept, but it becomes so developed later in the discussion about brachot, about amoitzi, about and all of about chala, about all of these things, which are like the Mishnah is very amorphic about it, I think. Yeah. The Mishnah? Yeah, the Mishnah itself, that's the text of the Mishnah that we talking about. Just a second, Itamar, I will just keep that. It's the second text on the first page. Yeah, Isat HaKlavim. The dog door, if the shepherd eats from it, you have to take the chala out of it. You have and then you have all other things that you can do with that. Yeah, you can do a roof with that. You can do shtuf with that. You have to do bracha on that. You can do zimun on that, and you can do it on Yom Tov. Okay. But we said all of this list, we are ignoring it because it's not important for our discussion. There is only one thing which is important in this list. The other thing is matzah, which is the next thing. ויוצא באדם ידי חובתו בפסח. אם אין אירועים אוכלים ממנה, אין אחרת החלה, אין מערבים בה, אין משתתפים בה, אין מברכים עליו, אין מנעשה ביום טוב. ואין אדם יוצא בידי חובתו בפסח. אוקיי, בין כך ובין כך, we'll come back to this sentence, but at the moment, you have the Mishnah is a list without a reason. Only the first intuition was, yes, of course, it's not lechem, so you don't have challah. It's not lechem, then it's not matzah. That was the first intuition that we had. And the second round was with Rabbi Shimon Mishans that says it is not. It's because of this drasha. But this drasha is only about challah. So when you take Maimonides on matzah, he says, why? That. And then he has to bring another reason. And he brings this anam shomer l'shem matzah, which we will discuss by itself, but that is like to follow the way how Maimonides work.
So following your remark that to understand what exactly the Chaim tries to do in that normal interpretation, what would a normal interpreter would have given as a reason for Maimonides' addition, I think it seems that interpreter would assume, and therefore you quote that interpreter a modern interpreter, that the text, the original text, has omitted or has been distorted throughout the years, and therefore is in some way lacking some crucial information. For example, here the text gives a series of exemptions, and each and every one of them has a different reason actually for its capacity of being exempted from the general rule. So the role of the interpreter is to reconstruct the original intention of the text and to add missing information that we have to assume that has been lost. And through that, the process of interpretation fills the gap in reconstructing the original message of the text. And I assume that you would like to undermine precisely that, isn't it?
Certain way of that. I mean, I would not go so far as you would suggest now. I mean, of course, in other cases, yes, but in that case, I would say that the Mishnah is this strange text that give you lists always, and especially if you read Mishnahs that there is no Talmud on. If you ever happen to open like Mishnah Taharot, Kelim, or whatever, then you have like the Chasizim and the Katzitzim and the Lekrin and then Tahor. A list of nonsense, and now when you look at such list, you are tempted first as a reader to say, okay, there is one reason behind it, and that we first said lechem. And then you come with a more sophisticated reader, perhaps, and says, no, it's a list. Let's try to find each one. And that is perhaps Maimonides, according to this up to now, Chaim, that immediately he will dismiss. Yeah, that's the next point, to dismiss this good explanation too. But if that, then we at least understand why Maimonides added, and Maimonides is one mind. Yeah, there is a third person, and that is assumption. There is of hermeneutician. There is a person. He is writing a text. He is very brilliant. That's we know. Maimonides was very brilliant. He doesn't write a text in such and he knows how to write text, no doubt about that. In contrast to the Ashkenazic Jews who never knew how to write any text till the last one of them. Maimonides was a master of writing text. No one can doubt that. And he brings this reason. So he's not like bringing it just because he doesn't know how to write text. And that is a reasonable assumption, I think, as a hermeneutician. So therefore, now we are in a very good position that now we know why Maimonides added this qualification of Meshumeret. And the reason, because every case needs specific reason. Challah has a specific reason. Matzah also needs a specific reason, and Maimonides focuses on challah, on matzah. He adds this point. So Maimonides is a very careful writer, according to that very traditional way of doing hermeneutics. That I think we all common sensely will go with this kind of interpretation till we see the revolution of the time that says you are all idiots, you don't know how to do hermeneutics. Okay, so now we are in a very happy moment. Let's destroy the moment with the next few sentences.
I have one more question.
Yes, of course.
So what is, or maybe we will find out about this point of the exercise, but what is then Sir trying to tell us? These is the choice of his choice of the sources arbitrary insofar as he wants to use them to prove a certain point, but he pretends he doesn't have a point to prove, that he's just looking for sources which will prove a point on their own? Or is he And does the choice of the sources, what does his choice of sources tell us?
Okay, I will try to answer that shortly now, because that will be one of the main points of discussion later. But just look at the text, okay? Let me just explain how I see it. Just in order to make it easier for where we are going, that's where we are in the reading now. You all have the text, right? It begins here. We are here now. Okay, we still have that. Here it's ended. I think that's Soloveitchik actually begins only here.
From where?
The next page, the whole thing here is still not Soloveitchik, and he begins only here. And only this next page, up to here, it's just a classical, which Soloveitchik does go round after round of a very typical classical rabbinical trying to do hermeneutics, up to here. And only here, up to here, is Soloveitchik, basically. Huh? And I think it's typical way of doing his, not only here, it's like very typical that he does it going first with a very, and our role now is to follow the very typical classical way of doing this kind of text analysis of hermeneutics, to try a bit to understand what we are doing and if it makes sense to us, and to wait for Soloveitchik to bring his punch. Right, to say, no, that's false. But up to now, he's just telling us, and I think he's telling it not in a way of in a dismissive way. He says, yes, let's do the work that everyone is doing when reading a text and see if it works. And what does it bring us? And what can we study from it? And I say more than him because I don't think he had any concept of that I'm using in terms of hermeneutics. I think just as we'll see, he enabled us to think these questions in a way that we couldn't do before him. And as I will come to the last point, the last meeting, the point will be to show that, to my view, and that is part of he is enable us to get with, he's enabled us with Nietzsche's genealogy, Freud's work of discussing dreams, and a few other fingers that look at text differently and enable us, and Soloveitchik, what he's contributing to us is the hermeneutical point of view. That Nietzsche couldn't do because he was not a hermeneutician, that Freud was not a hermeneutician. I mean, there's certain kind of perspective of what is, how to do genealogy or something like that, that Soloveitchik is part of that in the way that I think will help us to understand what is critique, modernity, and all of this nonsense. Okay? Back to this reading. I'm not sure if I answer, Raphael, but I'm just trying to say, just you have to bear with Soloveitchik one and another round, very classical, common sense to a certain degree, till we come to the point that you ask, okay, and what does Soloveitchik do? Okay, so let's destroy our good interpretation of Maimonides. Eli, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah. So this נראה לגזירת הכתוב והריסותיכם לבניין עומד להפעלת אדם תנאי בדין לחם ולא מקרי לחם עד שיחשב על להפעלת אדם. הנה אף מימה ואין זה שייך לדין לחם כי אם דאב לגזירת הכתוב בפני עצמה וחרה ואינה חייבת בחלה עד שיחשב עליה להתחילת אדם, גם כן קשה דברי הרמב"ם ועד בפסקים במ"ז, ניסה של מעשר שני.
Okay, so before that, okay, this is a very, I mean, I just somehow want to skip it because I don't want to confuse you with this like spiral way of writing. I'm tempted just to tell you what is written here and then to go to where we just stopped. Because actually he says, first he says, you have this way to study the biblical text, what we mentioned, but what does, I mean, and that is his, in a way, I mean, I don't want to say he's right or not, but at least it makes sense to anyone who studied Talmud that he's not like off the, that he's entirely wrong. He says, when you have something, you have certain kind of way that the Midrash learn or apply one concept on another, or say this expression means that, and so on. You can ask if that is in reference to to this certain object, or if it's reference to something. You have to exactly locate the place where this drasha is related to, because it's not like in the air. It is relating to certain issue, and he says, there is no reason to think that this arisot teichem, arisot is exactly what you do chala from. This is the issue of chala. So you study, if we follow the logic of Midrash Halacha, then it's not out, I mean, it's not entirely out of the sense to say that what the Midrash want to tell you is about something about lechem, not about chala specifically, but about lechem. And he's specifically, I mean, the study is about that. So he says, although you have a specific drasha, at least it's not so strong, at least you can entertain this idea. I mean, even if you don't accept what I'm saying, if you...
It seems to be that there is what it means that it's not there.
That's true. That's what he says. But I say even, I mean, I'm saying, he says that it makes sense. I'm saying that even if you don't take the strong way, even the weakest way to formulate solvage, I help solvage, okay? I say, even if you don't want to take it, even if you say that it at least makes sense to explain it like that, then you can bring it back to the issue of bread. So at least you cannot take it as exclusively explaining and saying no lechem, because perhaps there is lechem. And if there is lechem, then the whole explanation of Maimonides is a very limited explanation. You have to convince me that Maimonides really studied it like that. You have to do it. But he says, even if I do accept that all of that is, all of what I said now, that's how he ends the last sentence and then begins the question. Even if I accept that all of what I said up to now, this moment is nonsense, not true. Still, the issue still my answer, the brilliant answer that I have for Maimonides doesn't work, because we have a certain text from the Babylonian Talmud, which we look, and Babylonian Talmud, unless Maimonides has a very good reason to dismiss it and to say, we don't take Maimonides to just dismiss Babylonian Talmud text. So if we have a Babylonian Talmud text that Maimonides knows, of course he knows, and has to interpret like we will do, then our explanation for Maimonides fails. And that's the next thing, and that's what we are doing now before we end for today. So we just want to end with failure. Tomorrow we'll begin again. So, Eli. ועד היית בפסוחים? Okay, let's look at Psochim. It's like I quoted the text, so it will be easier. Right? I did. Yeah. Page 2, top. Okay?
אמר רבסי, תפיסה של מעשר שני, לא מדמים פתורה מן התחלה, בגלל החכמים חייבת לך.
Okay, so what? No, that's the text. Page 2 of the sources. On top. Psachim, Lamed Zayin, Amud Bet. So, Isa shel Maaser Sheni. Now, Maaser is another thing. Maaser Sheni is another thing that you have to take out of the whatever you do, the dough or the perot, the fruits or whatever. And there is, you do with it other things. Forget now about it doesn't matter what now. Just like look at the formalities. It's something that you take out of the dough and have to do something with, right? So, what is the case of Isa shel Maaser Sheni? Maaser Sheni itself is something that's basically it's not, it does not belong to you in the same sense that other things. Because think about, if you take something out of, not think about, I will tell you. If you take something out of the dough and you have to give it to the priest, then these things is not the status, the legal status of it is different. Who does it belong to? What you can do is that, what you cannot do is that. There are many things that's its status is different from what is the other thing that's left for you. Now there is a case of Maaser Sheni, which is also something that's its status is not exactly belong to you. It has a different status from normal thing, and you do something with all of that. You take all of this material, which doesn't belong entirely to you. It's like between you and God and the temple, not God, but temple, and you do from that a dough. Now, do you have to take from that things that anyway belong to the temple in a certain way? Not, we're not going to the discussion how. Do you have to take from that this portion and to give it to the priest, because it's already not, it's not belong, it doesn't belong to you anymore. So what do you do with that? It's a different, it's a kind of a case of margin, yeah. And that is the Mishnah. And Rav Asi, that's what he says. Rabbi Meir, there is the view of Rabbi Meir that in that case you don't have to take from that to take a portion of that and to give to the Kohen, because it's already belongs somehow to another place. And there is the view of Chachamim, the other, that say, yes, you do. Okay? So that is the basic Mishnah. Okay, what's going on now further? Matzot. Now, what is the case with matzah, which is made of these things of Maaser Sheni? So again, Rabbi Meir says you cannot eat it for Passover because he says that doesn't belong to you. So you have, but Chachamim says yes, you can. What is the case of a etrog in Sukkot? In that you have this, whatever it is. Everyone knows what is a etrog, or do I have to explain? Yeah, but how to explain? Okay, it doesn't matter.
Ritual fruit.
It's a ritual fruit for Sukkot. You have to do it with your own things. What is the case if you have you have your trees of etrogs, and you took, some of them belongs to Maaser Sheni, and you took, can you use it? And Rabbi Meir Omer, no, because it's consistent. That doesn't, as if, yeah, that's, I'm explaining it very commonsensically, that doesn't belong to you. And Chachamim says yes. And now, that is the Talmud itself already. Matkifla Rav Papa. Rav Papa is one of the Amoraim, and he asks challenges. I don't know how to say Matkif. Bishloma Isa. Okay, the case of Isa. That's the first case that Rabbi Meir talks about. I understand why. Because it says Arisoteichem. Remember that? So Arisoteichem, that means that door that is yours. that is from yours. And therefore, indeed, okay, Rabbi Meir makes sense because there is a specific interpretation of the text of the Bible that supports this view of Rabbi Meir. And the case of etrog, also I can understand why Rabbi Meir say what he says. Why? Because it says in the case of etrog, the biblical formulation is ulekachtem lachem. I can understand Rabbi Meir that he understands the text lachem, mishelachem yeh. That's why the text specifically, okay. Ela matzah, but in the case of matzah, miktiv matzatchem, did you see any text that says matzatchem, like arisotechem, like etrog shelachem? No, we don't have any text that says matzatchem. So why Rabbi Meir goes this way to say also matzah? No? So he breaks up the list, that is Talmud, yeah, breaks up the list and says, this makes sense, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense. That is Rav Papa. Yes. Again?
Isa and Arisa.
Yeah. Arisa is a biblical term. Isa is a Chazalic term.
For the same thing?
In that case, yes.
Like
No, but
you're talking about with Arisa refers to what?
To that thing which you, to that thing that you have to take from it, the thing that you give to the Kohen. Okay. Form. I don't want to interpret the Bible because I don't know the language of the Bible. But it's just too high and spiritual for me.
Find someone.
Yeah, I know. But okay, so we have here a problem that the Talmud says what Rav Asi says, according to Rabbi Meir, the way that he quotes him or says here is consistent, he says there is nothing consistent about because it's consistent only if you don't look at the reasons. There is a reason for etrog, there is a reason for Isa, for chala, but there is no reason for matzah. And to that answer, Rava answer, that's another one that is possible that says this answer. Atya, he studied lechem. That is a way to study the text of the Bible at that time. That's if you have at certain point, I'm saying it's really in a most simplistic way. Don't take what I say is wrong, but it's like fine enough in order to understand the text. If you have like in one place, like it says, the Bible says lechem, bread, and the other says the place it says bread, then if in one place it says something about bread in the sense of what is bread, how do you treat bread, etc., then you can reasonably think that it will be the same case in another case, and it goes more. So if there is a specific way to treat bread, for instance, then you have to think, and it says here, then you can also take it there. You can. The word, actually, you have to study the word in order to, and you can somehow play with the legal thing around. So he studied from one place that he says lechem to another place it says lechem. And he says, in the case of matzah, it says ktiv hacha lechem oni. The name of matzah, one of the names of matzah is that bread of poverty. Right? But it's called bread, and in the case of chala, in the case of the portion to the Kohen, it's ktiv hatam vaya bo'ochlchem milechem haaretz. When you are going to eat from the bread of the earth, so both cases they speak about bread, and if you think that here this bread should be from yours, then here this bread also should be from yours. It doesn't matter if this makes sense or not. The point is that for us it doesn't matter now to explain the midrash halacha. That is not what I'm trying to do. So whether it works or not, it doesn't matter. Just like follow the convention. Okay, so layman. Okay, that is, I think, this is enough in order to understand now what Reb Chaim is asking. He says, yes, now Eli, so Reb Chaim quotes, just give the reference to this text, and then he says what he thinks about this text. Yeah.
הוא מפרט שם בסוגיה, והוא כתיב אך הלחם עוני, וכתיב את הדאבות לחם הארץ.
So up to now, he's just saying, okay, what I just read now, that he says, this is what it says in this tract of Pesachim, that you have to learn from one lechem to another lechem, right? And you have to apply what is applied here too. Now, Maimonides knew this text. It's like a central text, Pesachim Bavli. Yes, Eri?
הרי מצא ירח המכלה לכל דבר, ואם כן, החינם מיני מצא המכלה גם לעניין אך דינה, ובעניין שיהיה מוכן לאכילת אדם. ואתה תיקשר למוצא הרמב"ם להוסיף, שוב, למוצא הרמב"ם להוסיף כמה דברים שאומרת. כי בלבלה באכילת אדם יצא בידי חובתו, משום ובעניין עומדת לאכילת אדם ככלה וצריך.
Yeah, okay. So now he says, think for a moment about this text in Pesachim. Now, what can we learn from this text that Maimonides knew? Maimonides knew that the Talmud says that what applied for the concept of lechem here applied from the concept of lechem there. So indeed, we have two cases. You're right that it looks like entirely random list in the challah and so, but there is a concept. Challah we study from the term lechem, and matzah from the term lechem, and what applied here should apply here. What is lechem here should be lechem there. So if you say about challah that it's isat haroim, etc. Arisoteichem, lechem, v'chole, it should be yours and not shel kelev. Then what is here should apply also here, as the same way that the Talmud says. I mean, there is no reason to think that only that will apply. It says lechem, what lechem? Lechem of yours. That is exactly the point. It's specification or qualifications of the terms bread. So if you apply this here, there is no reason not to apply it here. And that is exactly what the Talmud says. Study everything that you have here about lechem because you compare these two concepts entirely. So if that is the case, we are back to square one. We have like lechem. And if we have lechem, then we have to explain again why Maimonides add the qualification, this second part of ena mishumeret l'shem matzah that is not guarded, because again, it's entirely redundant. We don't need it. So we are at square one. Now we failed again to make sense of Maimonides' text. Now this failure, I want to close here with the following point. Again, to remind us, because everything that we do is now just the classical, a very classical way of doing, to understanding text. And I think, okay, what does he says up to now, Soloveitchik? Look at this way. Is it a commonsensical, right way to think? Like Maimonides knew this text? Yes. Maimonides makes sense that this text says that you cannot, that if here it's lechem, and the main point is lechem, it's not just like a random list. Yes, it makes sense. I mean, you can argue with that, but at least you can argue also for that. In the way that Maimonides thinks, because Maimonides knows the Talmud, Maimonides knows very well. So if that is the case, then again, we are back to asking as hermeneutician, as interpreter of the text, why do we need two different reasons for matzah that is made out of dog dough? So we are in square one or square zero again, square one, and tomorrow we'll see another square one and fall back, and at some point we'll find our way out to the nothingness. Okay. Questions? comments, or anyone just want to go to sleep?